Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Wrinkled, vain, and gay. Why can't I just make my skin stay? Good morning. Good morning. It is 8:03 a.m. on Wednesday, May 6, 2026. Don't mind me. I get in my feels every now and then about, generally I like aging. I do. Oh shoot, sorry. Let me turn that down. Generally I like aging. It's a thing that I have not, except for, of course, my meth addiction crisis of my 30s. I've taken aging rather gracefully, except that this whole sagging of the skin thing, it's getting to me. Anyway, good morning. So, have you guys heard? There's chairs that have legislative tags on them that were found somewhere, and it's like the biggest scandal that has ever erupted in the government of Guam ever. I mean, more than the Pacific Star Hotel issue, more than all those sole source contracts and procurements during the pandemic, more than the tens of millions of dollars spent at the hotels, more than the inability to build Simon Sanchez High School, more than all the failures of the infrastructure and the ability for the government to fix up Guam Memorial Hospital or to build a new Guam Memorial Hospital, more than all of the schools failing public health inspections. Remember that? It's just the greatest scandal that has ever hit the government of Guam. And of course, this is way bigger than the federal court case involving Churus and Oreo, Frankie Roslin, and Matthew Tapazia, and others. Way more than the audit. And of course, as Adelup would have us believe, way more important than the announcement of the legislative investigation. A rare tapping of investigative power by the legislature into an audit that was conducted by the Office of Public Accountability on fiscal year 2024 federal funds, and disclaimer opinions that show that there's a lot of missing documents. In the midst of all of this, 8 years of just gaslighting from Adelup, in the midst of, and what triggered legislative action being this audit, right? In the midst of that, Adelup, and it started yesterday, and political observers could see it from a mile away, right? Because of the types of people who was sharing this ridiculous news about they found chairs dumped somewhere and it has a legislative sticker on it, and so there's this big scandal. And so last night you saw people like Carlo Branch from Adelup sharing that news and saying what a travesty this was. And you can smell it from a mile away that this was something that Adelup conjured up. And it's their grand distraction, and it's just the dumbest distraction I have ever, like, if that's all, and you got to feel sorry for these, because, those of us who have worked in administration know that the 8th year is the hardest year. Because nobody takes your governor seriously. Nobody takes Adelup seriously because you're a lame duck. And it gets really hard to do things. And, Governor Lulian Girl, she wants to build a hospital. So that's her big thing, right? And it's getting harder and harder to do that as the days go by. And it's much harder because of everything that her lieutenant governor is embroiled in, the election season. And now you've got this investigation. And so in the Calvo administration, in the Camacho administration, in the Gutierrez administration, in that 8th year, you just keep throwing things until something sticks, and nothing ever sticks. But at least in the Gutierrez years, the Camacho years, and the Calvo years, in that 8th year, I don't think we did anything as stupid as a chairs distraction. This will go down in history as one of the dumbest fabricated distractions the political operatives have ever made up. And this morning, the governor's office actually gives this thing steam and puts their fingerprint on this thing by making it a part of their official response to the investigation news coming out of the legislature. This is hilarious. This is comedy on wheels for sure. We're going to talk about that investigation this morning. There's a lot of things to talk about this morning, actually. I have my list. And in our discussion, and we're not, so I talked about the investigation on my own last night with my opinions. This morning, we're going to bring Senator Chris Duenas on the phone to talk about that with us. There is a response from Adelup, like I told you, about the investigation news. I'm actually going to read that before I go to the intro. There is the video and news coming out of the acting governor's office about Simon Sanchez High School. We're going to play you that video, read you that news, and I want to talk about the irony of asking for a procurement bailout on the heels of an audit that says you guys aren't doing procurement right and there's suspicious spending. We'll talk about that. And then if there's time, there is news coming out of the Supreme Court of Guam, where the governor and the attorney general are engaged in a battle regarding the building of the hospital. The governor asked for declaratory judgment on a question related to the power of the governor over the hospital. The AG, of course, has opposed this, and the legislature has gotten involved, and their involvement is an interesting one. And so if there's time, we'll talk about that. Otherwise, we'll move that to the evening show. But what I want to read to you now, before we go to the first break, is Adelup's response to the legislative investigation. And if you're not caught up on this legislative investigation, what it is, the Senator Chris Duenas, the chairman of the Legislative Finance Committee, he circulated a resolution for co-sponsorship within his committee to start an investigation for the Rules Committee. That's the main committee of the legislature, the one that drives the legislature. For the Rules Committee to decide whether an investigation should be started by the Finance Subcommittee. It'd be called a Special Investigative Subcommittee, or SIS, to investigate essentially misconduct and corruption within the administration. And it will focus on the 2024 single audit, but it would most likely go beyond that into the contracts issues, the issues of corruption that have been coming up in news stories throughout the years. And so he introduced that yesterday. It's likely going to be in the Rules Committee agenda tomorrow for adoption. It was signed on to everyone on the Finance Committee except for Senator Joseph Augustine and Senator Tina Muñoz-Barnes. We'll get to that story in at another time. But let me read to you Adelup's response to this. It came this morning from John Ryan, the governor's communications director. The legislature is not responding to the audit. It is trying to politicize it, Adelup says. The FY24 single audit identifies documentation gaps, internal control weaknesses, and compliance issues that must be addressed. We take the findings seriously and have already been acting on them. The audit does not allege fraud, corruption, or misuse of funds. Yes, it does. Anyway, let's continue. It also does not support the story Republican legislators are trying to sell. We welcome any honest, fact-driven review. We will cooperate fully with auditors, oversight bodies, and any legitimate effort to strengthen compliance and accountability across government. What we will not accept is the distortion of technical audit findings into political attacks, and neither should the people of Guam. So Adelup is essentially saying that even though they got the worst type of audit that no one in their memory can remember the government of Guam getting, a disclaimer audit, we should just, because it's an election year and because Josh Tenorio made the decision that he's going to run for governor of Guam, we all need to wait until that election is over so that we can get answers to burning questions of accountability, transparency, and maybe even corruption. At the very least, the mismanagement of federal funds. At the very least, we have to wait. This is what Adelup is saying, that we got to wait because they're the ones who decided to run in this election year. After, let's be honest, knowing about these issues for the past 7-8 years. Let me continue. We also will not ignore the irony that some of the same legislators now attempting to claim the mantle of fiscal responsibility are the very ones auditors called out for their own conduct. It is noteworthy that the legislature adopted a budget and then passed $82 million in additional appropriations without adjusting revenues, a practice not considered prudent financial practice and is not adopted by the federal or other state governments. Can I just stop right here? I just want to point out something that's pretty glaring here. And the reason Adelup doesn't get specific with the names of the legislators is because they can't. This audit was for fiscal year 2024. You know who was in charge of the legislature? Democrats. You know who was the chairman of the finance committee? Senator Joe San Augustine, running for governor as a Democrat, and one of the two people who did not sign on to the investigation resolution. And you know what else? That $82 million in additional appropriations that they're talking about, most of that was done by Adelup's most loyal senator on the Democrat side, Senator Will Parkinson. Those were the power credits. As a result, the administration diligently monitors the fund balance so as to avoid falling into deficit, a fact acknowledged by the OPA. Okay, what about the disclaimers, Adelup? What about the missing records? What are you going to say about the missing record? Why haven't you talked about this? Why haven't you responded to the allegations peppered throughout the 198 pages of the audit about the missing files, the lack of procurement records, entire procurement records that are supposed to go across multiple agencies in having copies and sign-offs? Why can't the auditors find records to substantiate that spending was done within the bounds of the federal grants? Why can't auditors find the signatories? Why is there no paper trail for the spending of these funds? Paper trails that would reveal whether anything criminal happened in the use of these federal funds. None of that is discussed in this Adelup response to the audit. Instead, this is what Adelup does. They say, and this is on the second page of their release, before convening subpoenas and televised hearings, the legislature should first answer for that decision. After all, accountability is not selective. It cannot be invoked when it is politically convenient and ignored when it is not. Didn't we assume, and now we know our assumption's correct, it's been validated, that the first thing that Adelup was going to say about this was, oh, it's an election year. Oh, this is political. You shouldn't do this because this is political. It's the only thing that they have to grasp onto. Because this is where they go instead. Talk about gaslight of all gaslights. They should rename Adelup into San Francisco or to San Diego for their gaslight district. If the legislature is genuinely interested in identifying waste, fraud, or abuse, there are real questions already in the public domain. For example, reports that government property, including thousands of dollars worth of legislative furniture, was illegally dumped at Fort Apugan deserve serious attention. This is the kind of conduct the public expects to be investigated with urgency and transparency. Well, let's go with the first of all, right? First of all, really, that's all you've got. Chairs. Waste, fraud, and abuse. Chairs were found with legislative stickers on them at Fort Apugan. And of course, dumping is bad. And of course, waste, fraud, and abuse is bad. But that's what you're going to point to while the four fingers pointing back at you include the PUA controversy, emergency rental assistance, possible fraud and scandal, homeowners assistance fund, property scandal, and take your pick of anything else over the past 8 years because it's a very long list that goes beyond the four fingers that would point back. The administration has nothing to hide, Adelup says. We have been transparent with auditors. That's not what the auditors said. That is not what the auditors said whatsoever. We are addressing deficiencies. That's also not what the auditors said. The auditors said that this is a recurring thing. All of these different dings in the audit continue to recur, and they continue to get worse as every year goes by of this administration. Continuing, and we remain focused on strengthening systems, improving documentation, and ensuring full compliance with federal and local requirements. We are ready to work with the legislature on solutions, on reforms, and on the resources needed to improve oversight across all agencies. The people of Guam deserve oversight that is grounded in facts, not driven by politics. Our focus remains where it belongs, fixing what needs to be fixed, protecting public resources, and delivering responsible government. All right, we're going to talk to Senator Chris Duenas on the other side of this break. It's a 4-minute break. It's a commercial it's a political commercial. And after that, we'll get with Senator Duenas. Stick with us.
Every day I realize and I know I have enormous responsibility. For me, I wake up knowing that I have a lot of things going on. I don't know what my day is going to be like. But I wake up knowing that I have a big responsibility to do, and I need to do my best every single day. That is what I think about. It's a combination, actually, of two people. My grandpa, this is my mom's dad. His name is Jose Franquez. He was an accountant, so not necessarily an exciting job, but gosh, he loved to farm. He was very neat, but he was very patient. I'd never seen somebody so strong and patient than him. He didn't overuse his authority, but you would know when he was upset about something, and nobody would ever mess with that. My dad, he didn't grow up with a dad. My grandpa died right after they got out of Manyengan. And in his neighborhood in Sinahanya, he's like the older brother to many of the other kids that didn't have fathers. Either they died in the war or they left the families. But from him, I learned about hard work and being humble, but also being proud of who you are and being strong. That's the leadership that I emulate, both patient and understanding, but also strong and loving. I have a unique vantage point, at least in politics, because, I was a teenager when I met Ricky Berdalian. I'm one of the few politicians or leaders my age that actually had interactions with him. I used to work for his wife when I was in high school. I worked for Governor Gutierrez. I worked for Robert Underwood. I'm the partner of Governor Liu. So every single leader that the Democrats have pushed forward or who have aspired to be the leader of the Democrats to lead the island, I've had an opportunity to work with them. And it's been excellent to learn from them, to learn from all their life experiences. Well, if that happens, then we accept the decision of the court, and my time and attention will do a little shift. It'll include making sure that I am there to be the father figure for my nephews, to make sure that I'll do my responsibility to being a caregiver to my mom, all at the same time with fighting for and pushing the agenda of the island. And I am up to that. I'm prepared, and I won't be dissuaded in that job. What I would say is that even in your own homes, it is nearly impossible to know and be responsible for the actions of even the closest members of your family that you love and trust. Sometimes your own trust gets betrayed, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up or step away from my family members. I trust them that they are going to make the right decisions. And when family members don't make the right decisions, then they have to account for those bad decisions. Doesn't mean that I'm going to love them any less. It just means that perhaps things change in the dynamic of your own family. I have 3 nephews, 2 from my sister and another one that's real close to me. And I always think about being there for them. That's the inspiration to do the best that I can, because I think that they're so talented. I worry about them, and I feel like I need to do the best job I can so that they are going to have the best shot in life to do what they need to do and live a good life.
I'm Josh Tenorio.
And I'm Tina, and we approved this message.
All right, joining us now to talk about the audit is Senator Chris Duenas. Oh shoot, what did I do here? is Senator Chris Duenas, the chairman of the Legislative Finance Committee and the author of the resolution for the investigation of the administration. Good morning, Senator.
Hi, good morning, Troy, and good morning to the Kandit family.
Thank you so much for joining us. Senator, what is the next step in this in this process?
So the next step is to convene the Committee on Rules. Obviously, we had a very strong support in the committee with co-sponsors. And so to convene now Committee on Rules, and I'm working with the Vice Speaker on that. And once we pass the resolution and rules, then we can get underway with the committee's work.
I noticed there is a Rules Committee meeting tomorrow. Is it going to happen as soon as tomorrow?
Tomorrow is the Rules Committee meeting for the establishment of the legislature's agenda for the May session. So we will be doing another Rules meeting just specifically for this resolution. And I need to speak to the Vice Speaker this morning on the exact timing of that, but it should be happening very quickly.
Am I correct, Senator, that the other members of your committee who signed on to this are the vice chairman of the committee, that's Vice Speaker Ada, the Speaker of the Legislature, Frank Blas, Jesse Lujan, Vince Borja, and Sabrina Salas-Matsanani?
That's correct.
And there are two other members of your committee who did not sign on, and they are Joe San Augustine and Tina Munya Barnes?
That's correct. That's what the record reflects in terms of the voting, yes.
Did they or their staff say why they didn't sign on?
We didn't get any reason associated with that, but obviously we have what we need going forward. So, hopefully, they'll also participate. I will set up the committee members initially, 2 from each side in my committee, and then also myself as the chair to break any tie-on decisions. But we will also, of course, keep the entire committee up to date on what we're doing.
Who in the resolution it said 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Would the chairman of the committee, being yourself or your designee, be the one appointing the 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans?
Yes, I will do that as part of the duties as spelled out with this special power.
If this resolution passes, would you be the chair or would you designate somebody else?
I'm not sure yet, but I believe that I will more than likely go ahead and chair it. Really, it's my duty as the Office of Finance and Budget, chairman, to ensure that the real issue now and the stickler to me, and the reason why we moved in this manner is simply because we have a situation where we're sending back millions of dollars to the feds consistently. And if you look at the issue of the disclaimer, on the disclaimer findings, and that's the focus of this audit, it really is the whole impetus as to why now we are this year appropriating local funds for Homeland Security is because they cannot operate, and the governor has been transferring for the last 4 years local revenue, general fund revenue over to Homeland Security because they have been unable to clean up their books, to reconcile their books, and to have the feds say, okay, we can start reimbursing you for those prior years, which is the way that fund works. It becomes a revolving fund by taking last year's funding and using it for this year, 100% federally funded. That's the hallmark of what happens when we do not, adhere to what the federal guidelines are for these kind of expenditures. So definitely, that's in my wheelhouse, and so I will chair it.
Senator, I know you talked to us about this before, actually just a couple of days ago, but can you rehash for us, how serious is it when auditors give out an opinion called a disclaimer opinion? And how serious is it when there are 5 disclaimer opinions in one fiscal year?
Well, I think it's serious enough that actually it looks like there's going to be parallel investigations, or at least definitely the public auditor came out and said also that he is very concerned about this and will be doing their own internal work to try to get to the bottom of it as well. I think it's serious, very serious, and for the simple reason that, not having the ability to have documentation, not having the ability to have readily available documentation so that you can verify, and as you've pointed out many times in your deep dive to it, in order to be able to actually account for those expenditures, really puts the government of Guam in trouble going forward. Because if we consider, in fact, the OP, I believe this is one of his findings, as you've discussed before. He believes it's one of the reasons why, as you've stated, the delay in continuing to allow federal funds to flow is because they have serious problems with the way the government of Guam is accounting for and perhaps spending, and also what can be beyond that. You have to interpret that if this kind of activity, particularly when in the past there have not been these corrective actions that have been called for, and I believe 12 findings of still not making that corrective action, you have to find out then, what is the reason. If that's systemic and just so terrible, there has to be a major change. And then if it's, if it can at some point be proven that there's some deliberateness and nature to it, then that has to be accounted for if there's possible criminal activity.
And Senator, so fiscal year 2024 federal funds, that audit on its own, there's a lot to go through there on its own, right? But talk to us how an investigation spiderwebs from that to, because we know, those of us who've been paying attention over the past 8 years know that there have been several scandals, several questions of misconduct that have never reached a lens of accountability beyond the public auditor. And there have been multiple audits that have said this thing, that thing, or the other thing, and then also multiple investigative news reports by the several media outlets in Guam about alleged misconduct in the government of Guam. Talk to us about how this legislative investigation that first focuses on this FY24 federal funds audit can branch out to reach those other issues that the public might want you guys, or does want you guys to look at.
Well, I think the major thing here is that you've seen oversight hearings, you've seen budget hearings where we swear in individuals, and I'm not saying it's not the right answer to say I don't have that answer, I'll get back to you. But I can tell you, I think you've experienced that as well in your time in the executive branch. The get back to you never happens. Mm-hmm. And so the issue of this committee and the seriousness for which we do this deep dive is that you no longer are, your committee only has so many staff and you can have so many hours to basically do those follow-ups on. We asked you this question, where is that? When you get this investigative committee, this is where you can really do the deep dive, and you can subpoena not only documents but individuals. You can hire an attorney to vet what's going on and look at the legal aspects of the back and forth. And so I think that this time under these circumstances with this special authority, what it really outlines and what it really can do now is bring about that kind of situation. I also I do believe we have some meetings in the future, but I think also there's individuals now that are wanting to come forward and maybe meet with the committee because of the fact that they're like, well, I want to get ahead of this. You know what I mean? There's some things. Yeah. So there's some things that we want to talk to people about. And so we've had messages like that. We'll see if it comes through. But I think that's also one thing that this investigation does is, maybe some people that are like, listen, I don't want to deal with that situation where I'm having to be investigated and I know things. I want to just go ahead and provide that documentation for it. So I think in terms of what you're talking about, that's also the possibility where we can start forwarding those things for further investigation by law enforcement. And so that's I think where that can spur that activity.
That's so. Are you saying that potential witnesses to certain things are already coming forward, and there's a possibility you guys could depose them or at least accept their documents?
There have been some messages, and we have to vet them, and so we will see whether or not they're willing to come forward. But there have been information that some folks want to meet. And so we'll see where that goes from there, and whether they're just saying, "Hey, can we come forward and talk to you, ahead of your investigation? We've already want to provide this." Maybe that's it as well. But we want to make sure that we vet whether or not those are things that they want to just clear the record on right away.
I can tell you,
we'll do that.
That we at Kandit,
we'll do that in the committee. Yeah.
we at Kandit, whenever your committee gets, if the rules committee approves this and your committee gets underway, the SIS gets underway, we are already preparing a binder of our investigative work into contracts related to Adelup that we would gladly send over to the committee in the event that the committee wanted to look into that, or at the very least make referrals from the committee to proper authorities.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying, Troy, you really, it's, the committee is going to focus. Once again, the committee is going to focus, and it's very clear what we have in the resolution, the capability of where we are. But wherever it takes us, it takes us. If there are people that come forward and say, hey, we want to meet with the committee, we want to provide information now so that we're the ones putting it on the record, then that's the time. But that's where I'm saying that, to me, Troy, that's how something can expand. Outside of that, we're going to concentrate and focus on the audit findings. We believe there's a lot there. And let's start from the beginning, Troy, and I think you readily agree with this too. If what we do at the end of this is find out that really systemic processes are so bad that major corrections need to be made, the people of Guam are still going to be very happy about that, because I actually heard Ed Byrne on another interview, and I was a little bit disappointed, saying that this is federal funds. To me, that's the wrong answer, because this is federal funds. First of all, we don't live on Guam without federal funds. Those are absolutely vital to us. Once again, this civil defense is the poster child for millions of dollars that the local government has to pay for defending our island. That's a federal program, and that's serious issue. And so I think that the focus on this is absolute, and if that was the if that's the least of what comes out of this, I think the people of Guam, got their money's worth, and this is what they expect from the legislature. Beyond that, I think really it's going to be a lot of self-reporting that causes the committee to go beyond its scope.
Senator, can I clarify one of the things? So you were talking earlier about oversight hearings and the inability to get answers sometimes from administration officials, and one of the top ways that administration officials are able to deflect from accountability is to invoke some type of confidential exceptions, right? Those exceptions do not exist in a legislative investigation, right? For example, you guys can compel under a sealed hearing testimony on personnel, or the records regarding personnel, unlike in an oversight hearing, right?
That's correct. And what we would do then, of course, is we'd be doing that. That's where we would employ an attorney to be able to make sure that everything is done correctly, to make sure that the information being obtained is such that it is appropriately cataloged and done in a way that, unless it's turned over for some sort of prosecution or movement forward, then that's when it releases from the committee. And also of course, the chief legal officer of the government of Guam, the attorney general, I would imagine that anything that comes forward immediately that on its face says, wait a minute, this is beyond the scope of the committee, we will just make an immediate referral as well. But yeah, I think that if there's some sort of kind of gray area, if you will, where there's like, well, we need to keep this confidential, that can be vetted by the committee and say, okay, that's fine, we can take the information under seal. Yes.
So Adelup responded to you guys that they're not calling it a legislative impending investigation. They're calling it a legislature's response. They're choosing their words very carefully here, right? They say, Adelup says, this is as of 7 a.m. today. The audit does not allege fraud, corruption, or misuse of funds. Can I get your response to Adelup's statement there?
Well, certainly, I think they're relying on the information that's been put out, that it's a focus on this particular disclaimer findings. But we also don't not allege it, right? So I think the thing is that anything can be there, anything goes, and that's the reason for the committee. I think once again, we have to move beyond with this kind of finding. We have to move beyond the typical, let's have an oversight hearing, let's swear people in, and let's have a question and answer session. I think that obviously the committee's concerned enough to be able to say we have to look deeper. So of course, yes, I mean we got to be careful about that too, right? We don't want to, we don't want to color what we're doing by coming out and saying, this is fraudulent, therefore we're doing this. But what we're saying is this is really, really serious, and we're doing it, and where the chips will fall where they may.
So you guys don't have the luxury of saying this because you're in the midst of, you're about to begin an investigation. But Senator, if it looks like a rat and smells like a rat, it's more than likely a rat.
I think the people kind of make those decisions, right? And I think that the people that follow you and that have followed, maybe with some of their disappointment and what they've seen along the lines, make their own interpretations as well. So once again, we have to make sure that we're sticking to the scope of what is the starting point on this. But certainly, I think there's cause if people are themselves are taking issue and thinking that the activities could be improper.
What do you say to Adelup's allegation that you guys are politicizing this audit?
Well, first of all, we're not responsible for the almost 200 days lateness of this audit. Now, I know there's been reasons of lack of auditors, lack of accounting folks, and the like. But even once again, listening to Ed on another media today, basically said that he personally held back the audit because they were chipping away at answering findings that were millions more than what they finally decided that, okay, let's cut this off and put the audit out. So the audit release actually right now was self-imposed in terms of this timing. We don't choose the timing, but we certainly have to do our job. And I think it would be probably alleged political not to do something more about this.
And what do you say to the allegation that, let me just read it to you. This is what Adelup says this morning. We also will not ignore the irony that some of the same legislators are now attempting to claim the mantle of fiscal responsibility are the very ones auditors called out for their own conduct. And this is referring to the $82 million in fiscal year 24, the $82 million in additional appropriations without adjusting revenues.
Well, first of all, the governor signed those bills, and Ed Byrne himself was down at the legislature stating that fund balances were appropriate to that. I did not have the mantle at that time of being the oversight chair of Office and Finance and Budget. So to basically steer that towards our way is inappropriate. I personally was the one in fiscal year 2025 that stopped $120 million worth of appropriations and miscellaneous provisions on the basis of a simple finding of $27 million of excess revenue. And I got 11 senators on the floor to vote with me for that. And that process stopped then, and it has stopped during my watch. If you notice, it's kind of interesting too with their findings, because the prior session that we just recently had, there were fiscal issues, matters that were before us, which required Ed Byrne to come down. And in that same session, he basically denoted all of the things that they claim are appropriations from prior years in the current budget as being fully budgeted and available for things going forward. Therefore, recognizing, being careful with the current fund balance that we have, or excess revenue tracking, not fund balance, but excess revenue tracking. So I can unequivocally say that for our committee and the senators that have been doing the work in the 38th, that is not attributed to us. You can't attribute something to us that basically is not even up for audit. So that's prior years and a practice that we're not doing. I probably have close to $60 million of pending appropriation requests against current excess revenues that I've purposely held off on having public hearings for, because I was the one who stopped that practice personally.
Obviously, there's the sentiment that that this response from Adelup is disingenuous at best, right? What would you have preferred Adelup said in their response?
Well, I mean, I would have preferred that they say, we are equally as concerned as the legislature is about the findings That's why we were working on ensuring that we could provide additional answers to the auditors. But we welcome this scrutiny. We welcome the investigation. We will participate fully. And like I said, even on another media, unfortunately, I think Ed was kind of taking a swipe at the auditors and blaming the auditors, saying he has a meeting with the auditors today because he wants to let them know with his audit experience, that there's problems with the way they're doing their work. Now, I don't know, if he's right, then we've got bigger problems, right? But the fact is I don't know that that's the direction to go right now. In fact, in the prior hearing when we had the oversight, and OPA said, oh, no, you don't. He wanted to go out and basically scrap the multi-year contract that we're currently under going forward. I don't think that that's the approach. I think the approach is you always want to sit down at the table and work with people in order to be able to work on the findings, as opposed to kind of alleging that they're the problem. But so for me, I think with your communications experience also, and the time that you worked in this arena, of course you want to put your initial response out. But I think the better way to do this is welcome it with open arms. When you're fighting so hard against something that traditionally means if there's smoke, there might be some fire there.
Can we just go back? So, Ed Byrne is saying that Ernst and Young doesn't know how to do their job. Did I hear that right?
Well, his statements were that he has serious problems with a lot of the audit, maybe procedurally or the like. And then he's, like I said, he's not been shy about that. Like I said, the auditor said no in terms of going to rebid the multi-year contract. So yes, clearly he has differences. That's their world, right? That's what they do. But I don't know if that's the way it's handled typically. I mean, if obviously it's a very tedious and a very involved process, but I don't know if you publicly say these guys, I've got problems with these guys and I think they might be the problem. I don't know if that's the approach, but if that is, then that's on them. And then I would say that that's another reason why I would welcome the investigation, to say, let me show you, my pain, right? And it's okay, let's do this.
Can I just tell you that Ed Byrne saying that about the auditors is kind of like if I went up to Christiane Amanpour and I said, you're not really doing a great job as a reporter. Let me show you a few tricks. Or if I went to Rhoda and went up to like anybody in Rhoda and I was like, I don't think that you're speaking Chamorro very well. Let me teach you a few things.
It's certainly not enough. I mean, I would have to have a lot behind me to be able to make that statement, and maybe that's his position. I know better. But
it's audacious, but to say the least. Lastly, Senator, have you taken any chairs, or you or your staff taken any chairs from your office and dumped them over at Fort Apugan?
Oh God, no. And I think a simple phone call could have handled that. But here's what I want to say.
Yeah.
And I want to give a very, very, very big ups to and props to the Vice Speaker. If you come down to the legislature and you see the properties that we're responsible for, and they were in terrible shape under the last leadership. But if you come down right now, you're going to see the grass is manicured, the trees are trimmed. We have a team that goes over and works with the homeless and asks them, what they need. Some of us provide some things for them, and we've been able to say, look, guys, work with us on this. We manage this property, so we have guests coming, and we want to help you. We want to help you with what you might need and things like that. And we've gently went into others and said, look, you got to pack up and whatever else it is. But if you look at the plaza, if you look at our properties, very, very well maintained. So we can do it. We have a limited budget as well. And but Warren is a good friend of mine. I'm really surprised he didn't pick up the phone. And we want to find out too why those chairs were up there. And if they're a responsibility from anyone here, they're going to have some issues.
Senator, when's the last time one of the members of the legislature had any type of function over at Fort Apugan?
Oh my goodness. I can tell you that in my memory, and definitely during this term, I don't remember anything except for maybe some of our people that have been doing cleanups, going up there and cleaning up. But I certainly don't remember any function that we had up there. And this, like I said, once again, this is an unfortunate situation. You know, the
Wasn't
legislature has been doing a lot to help, and so but I don't. I know we haven't had a function up there,
Senator,
to my
wasn't
knowledge.
wasn't there a gubernatorial team announcement involving a member of the legislature that was held at Fort Apugan?
Man, I'll have to put on my thinking cap, but I think there was an announcement up there. I think there was.
That's interesting. And what do you think of? And I'm going to ask. I know you have a duty to be diplomatic and to watch your words, and I understand that when you are an elected official, there is that burden that weighs upon you. But I'm I'm going to ask if you could for a moment take that filter off, and I'm going to read to you what Adelup said about this whole chairs issue, and I'm going to ask for your response. And this is what Adelup said. If the legislature is genuinely interested in identifying waste, fraud, or abuse, there are real questions already in the public domain. For example, reports that government property, including thousands of dollars worth of legislative furniture, was illegally dumped at Fort Apugan, deserve serious attention. Your response to that?
Well, I think it's petty. I think it's completely unnecessary, and I think it's indicative of guilt. You know, whenever you're in a conversation with someone and you're discussing a sensitive matter, and all they can do is hurl insults at you, hurl some sort of allegation that they themselves haven't even done their research on. Because if Warren would have called us, I'm sure we would have been able to say, Warren, don't know where that came from. We will take care of it internally, and we'll be right there with the pickups that I'm looking at right now in our parking lot to run up there and grab it. So I think it's petty and childish, really.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your time, especially that you spent 30 minutes on the phone with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Troy, and God bless you, and God bless Guam.
God bless you, Senator. Thank you. That was Senator Chris Duenas, the chairman of the Legislative Finance Committee, and certainly going to be the target of political ire coming from Adelup from now until the election, because he introduced a resolution that looks like it's on its way to passage that will begin an investigation against the administration. Just, I mean, groundbreaking, earth-shaking stuff in the political and the government realm. And we heard his resolve this morning, his answers to our questions, and also his responses to Adelup's written response about what the legislature is proposing to do. And I think, my friends, we may have found yet another, and it's not that many that we were able to count on our fingers, right? I think we may have found yet another elected official willing to put it on the line for the sake of accountability and transparency, meaning for our sake. On the other side of the commercial break, we're going to talk about Simon Sanchez High School and a proposal by the acting governor to the legislature to sidestep the procurement process, the existing procurement process, in order to allow Cortec to move on with the development of Simon Sanchez High School. We will talk about these things on the other side of this short commercial break. I am so sorry about that. My mouse died. Pardon me. You should have seen me during that blackout period after that Wendy's commercial. I was flipping out because my mouse froze and it froze on the cursor because it needed to be like I didn't charge it last night. I'm not a responsible, organized person. And so I'm growing as I age and my skin starts to sag. I'm maturing in certain things, one step at a time here. I only just recently made, after 7 years of Kandit, now we have a regularly scheduled morning show and an evening show. Very big steps for me to take. So things like making sure that the mouse and the keyboard are properly charged. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to get to that kind of organizational level, like people like Jacob Nakamura are at, So there is, let me actually, while I'm chatting it up, right? Let me charge my mouse. Simon Sanchez High School, the development of Simon Sanchez High School has been a thing in our public lexicon since 2013. Since 2013, when Gretchen Andres and her students at Simon Sanchez High School at the time, and think about this, the seniors of Simon Sanchez High School in 2013 are in their 20s now. I'm sorry, in their 30s now, right? Yeah, they're in their 30s now. I think they're 30. Am I getting that right? Am I doing that math right? Yeah, I think I'm doing that math right. They're like 30 years old now. Anyway, so it's been that long. So they began a public campaign to pressure the government of Guam to build a new Simon Sanchez High School because of years of maintenance neglect and maintenance deferments that led to an unsafe condition throughout that campus. You remember the wires coming down from the ceilings. That place was just a cinder box waiting to happen. It was a fire waiting to happen, where you had this square or this rectangular concrete box, and in the middle of it were all of these drywall partitions that separated classrooms. It was just not a safe school. And the bathrooms, all that stuff, right? And so it took a public pressure campaign to convince the government at that time to commit to something. So they committed. The government, it was the Calvo administration, and Judy Wampat was the Speaker of the Legislature and the Chair of the Committee on Education. And I remember it was a race. It was a fight to see who could take the credit, Governor Calvo or Speaker Wampat. And it was just stupid, right? But anyway, they ended up getting something done. They passed something. That first thing had to be amended into something else. And of course, when you talk about more than $100 million in financing, you're talking about big money. You're talking about development companies, construction companies, people in this island who have a lot of political weight and influence because of the amount of money that goes around. You talk, and all the middlemen, all the consultants in between who want to take their piece of the pie off of the public trough. And so it isn't a surprise that from the inception of this thing, there has been all of this controversy, all of this scandal, all of this delay. It has been, so that passed back in 2014. It has been 12 years. And there have been promises by then Governor Eddie Calvo, then candidate Lou Leon Guerrero and Josh Tenorio, then first term Governor and Lieutenant Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Josh Tenorio, and now lame duck Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and running for governor candidate Josh Tenorio to get Simon Sanchez built. They've broken all of these promises over the last 12 years, 2 administrations, Democrats and Republicans in both parties. Now we're at another procurement. And there was a developer selected, Cortec, which ironically was the developer who back in 2018, back in the day, back during the Calvo administration, was the developer who was not selected to develop Simon Sanchez High School and ended up protesting. So that led to that first protest, and then things went downhill, and then that was canceled and everything, right? So this time, Cortec actually won the procurement. And there is a company, I can't remember the name, they are protesting. I believe they were the second in line. They're protesting the procurement. They have 3 different protests that have been lodged that stopped the development from moving forward as the procurement law dictates, right? There was a law passed by, I think it was Roy Kinata. There was a law passed by somebody that allowed for procurements to go forward, but only if there is a determination of a substantial interest of the government of Guam that would allow for the government to sidestep the stay process, the procurement appeal process. But you would have to say there was a substantial interest to do so. Department of Public Works invoked that in order to allow the procurement, the development to move forward. And that immediately got appealed to the public auditor, and the public auditor came back and said there was no substantial interest here. And furthermore, the head of the agency responsible for this, the superintendent of education, didn't even sign off on this. And so, no, you cannot do this. The procurement stay remains, and we will resolve this through the procurement process that's prescribed under law. So the lieutenant governor, or the acting governor, he has introduced a bill apparently to the legislature. Well, actually, let me read it. Let me take my mouse off. There we go. Mouse is connected and almost kind of charged. There is a letter that he has sent to the Speaker of the Legislature where he says, I'm transmitting for introduction an act to build Simon Sanchez High School now. This is what the LT says. For more than a decade, the people have shared a clear and unified expectation that a new Simon Sanchez will be built. I'm going to skip over some stuff, okay? The expectation has been supported across administrations, legislatures, and communities. Yet despite that consensus, blah, 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 blah. This measure is intended to restore balance to that process. It authorizes DPW to proceed with the award, execution, and performance of the project, notwithstanding pending protests or appeals, while preserving the right to challenge procurement actions and ensuring that remedies remain available under law. The goal is straightforward. Allow lawful construction to proceed in good faith while safeguarding accountability, rather than permitting delay to function as a de facto veto over critical public infrastructure. Okay. I'm going to play for you now the acting governor's video where he talks to the people of Guam about his proposal.
My fellow Guamanians, for 13 long years, through 2 administrations and 6 legislatures, we have carried a promise in our hands like a lantern in the dark, a new Simon Sanchez High School worthy of our children. We said it would be built, we voted for it, we budgeted for it, we believed in it, and still it has not risen. Today, I speak to you not in anger, but in clarity, because 2026 must be the year the waiting ends. There is no serious debate about whether this school should be built. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, every parent, every teacher, every student, every village agrees. And yet agreement alone has not laid a single block of cement. That is the hard, frustrating truth we must confront. How does a project everyone supports still remain undone? How do contracts get signed, crews assembled, and equipment arrive only for everything to stop, sometimes days before the first shovel breaks ground? Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, through protests, appeals, and procedural stalls that begin the cycle all over again. This is not a story of bad faith. It is a story of a system that has outlived its purpose. Procurement laws designed to protect the public good have instead become weapons of delay. Safeguards meant to ensure fairness have been turned into instruments of paralysis. Accountability has been preserved, but progress has been lost, and the deepest cost has not been measured in dollars or timelines. It has been paid by our sons and daughters, young people who walk through temporary classrooms and modular buildings, students who spend their entire high school journey in transition, in double sessions far from home, never knowing the dignity of a true campus, the inspiration of modern labs, the pride of a school built for them. Some entered as freshmen and graduated as seniors without ever stepping foot inside the Simon Sanchez they were promised. This isn't just delay. This is disappointment being passed from one generation to the next, and it must end. We do not need to abandon accountability to reclaim progress. We must restore balance to ensure that challenges can be heard without holding our children hostage. The work must begin now. We can protect the right to legitimate protest, but we can also allow construction to happen if protests are without any real justification. That is reasonable. That is responsible. With all this in mind, I have transmitted a bill to the legislature. This legislation, an act to build Simon Sanchez High School now, allows the Simon Sanchez procurement to proceed and for construction to begin. Years ago, when faced with a similar crisis, a past governor and a past legislature set aside their differences and came together in the name of students, in the name of progress, in the name of a promise to rebuild John F. Kennedy High School, a campus, ironically now, used to shelter the sharks who now need a home of their own. Today, I call on our current leaders to do the same. Choose the right path our predecessors went down and act to help our students. But let me be clear, I do not come before you with a my way or the highway attitude. Members of the legislature have quietly offered thoughtful alternatives: merit-based days, bonds to stop frivolous delays, streamlined procurement for truly critical public projects. These ideas deserve rigorous examination no matter who puts them forward. I am asking senators to do this. In the next 10 days, bring forward every serious proposal, including my own. Hold the hearings, engage the public, test the ideas, forge the strongest bill or bills possible. If they clear the way for construction to begin, lawfully, ethically, and without further needless delay, send them to Adelup and we will act. Distrust and disagreement usually greet such calls and results in no action. But this cynicism is a luxury our students can no longer afford. When systems fail to deliver what the people overwhelmingly demand, leaders have a duty to reform them. That duty falls on all of us now. Simon Sanchez High School is more than concrete and steel. It is a test of whether government can be responsive to its people, whether we can still rise above our disagreements and make good things happen. On this island, we have always found a way to come together when things mattered the most. Now is one of those times. This is a spirit that rebuilds our island after typhoons. It carried our families through war and recovery. It is the same spirit that must now build this school, and that is the choice before us today. So let us come together and get this done. Let us choose action over excuses. Let us build the school our children deserve. Build Simon Sanchez High School now. Thank you. God bless our students, and God bless Guam.
So I think my favorite thing in that whole thing was this is not political, not about who takes the credit, but rather than just sending the bill with a letter to the legislature like we normally do, I'm going to do a whole commercial on it and send it out to all of the media and to post it on all the social media pages so that everybody knows that this was my bill. It's just, that was probably my favorite part of that whole thing. But okay, let's talk about it, right? Because he is proposing a solution to getting this thing out the gate, to getting the development going. It really, I mean, if we're being serious here and objective here, he's proposing a solution. Now, is the solution acceptable? One of the arguments that the lieutenant governor made was, look, we did this before. We did this with John F. Kennedy High School. And it's something of an irony because at the time that this happened, the lieutenant governor worked at Cortec. He was he was like a director of legislative affairs or something like that. It was a role that he had at Cortec. This was before he became the director or the policy coordinator of the judiciary or something like that, right? Or the director of the courts. He had this position for a couple of years over at Cortec. This was around that same time. And Cortec was the company that lost the development of John F. Kennedy High School to, oh gosh, the name escapes me. I can't remember the name of the developer, but there was a very big thing. And so such a small world, right? The Simon Sanchez High School thing happened because of public pressure from Gretchen Andres and her students. The John F. Kennedy High School rebuild started with the public pressure campaign by Gretchen's husband, Angelo Andres, who was a teacher at JFK at the time, and I think he still is, and his students over at JFK. And this was something that they started back in 2008 or 2009. There was Attorney General at the time, Alicia Limtiaco, closed down the campus, and it had to do with it not meeting public health requirements, and then Angelo Andres and his students, they were like, we got to rebuild this campus. Don't take this campus away. Remember, the government was considering at that time selling that or leasing out that property for some economic development, tourism, something. And Angelo Andres and his students were like, no, keep this as JFK. And as a matter of fact, we want you to rebuild JFK. So there was a whole procurement that happened, and a certain group won, the developer won, I can't remember the name. And then Cortec, which lost the bid or lost the RFP to the other offerer, they protested. And at the time, Josh Tenorio was an employee or one of the people over at Cortec. And if you can go back into the news files, and he was kind of like their spokesman at the time. And Cortec was bringing up some pretty darn good points about, hey, this offer went above the amount and it wasn't even within the confines of the procurement. How can that happen? And there was this that was missing and that was missing. This is a legitimate protest. The problem was for the public that the protest process took so long that there was no longer an appetite publicly to stick by Cortec. And so what happened was the legislature passed a law that allowed the sidestepping of the procurement process, and Cortec stepped aside. Cortec made a decision back then. They were like, look, okay, in the public interest, and I talked to Senator Eddie Calvo, and I talked to Governor Felix Camacho. This is the owner of Cortec, Ho Yun. He was like, I'm going to step aside in the public interest, and we're going to let this go. But Josh Norris right. There was something. There was a sidestepping of the procurement process back then, and this is what it yielded. Back in 2012, 2013, 2014, there was a series of stories in the PDN. The PDN, they grabbed onto this like it was the worst thing that could ever happen. And it had to do with, again, it was Cortec. Cortec owned these properties at Teedson. And Governor Eddie Calvo had this, along with DOE Superintendent John Fernandez, had this whole thing, right? Let me plug in my dumb mouse while I'm talking, while I'm yapping it up with you guys. They had this vision, right? They were going to, because of the issues at Unsalon Middle School and the issues with all of the other schools, they were going to use Teedson, these properties at Teedson that the government was leasing. I think it was on some type of temporary basis or something. It was a lease that happened since the JFK rebuild days, and it's currently Teedson High School, but this was way before there was ever a Teedson High School. The governor at the time went through, what's that place? Unsalon Middle School. It was dilapidated. It was falling apart. So it was like, we need a place to move these kids. And then we also need a place to move kids into as we rebuild all of these other schools. There was this grand plan by Eddie Calvo to rebuild all of these different schools. Ocean View Middle School, Inarahan Elementary and Middle, Agata Johnston, Beneventi Middle. There was a lot, and the top of the list wasn't even Simon Sanchez. It was George Washington High School. That was the school that actually needed the most amount of repair. It's just that, politics being what is, and because of the public pressure campaign, Simon Sanchez moved to the top, even though it wasn't the top school that needed to be rebuilt. It was GW. So anyway, the only place that was available that was like, okay, we can move kids in there now, was this place in Teedson, because it had already been outfitted that way in order to support the JFK rebuild. So Eddie Calvo was like, all right, let's do that. Let's enter into a lease with Cortec. And the PDN went after it like a hawk, right? And I was the communications director at the time, so I was like, okay, let's put some math to this, right? Let's provide the PDN and everybody else with all the facts about this, because they were alleging that it was some sort of corrupt deal, and really it was just the only place that was available, and that was all it was, and it went through the scrutiny of the legislative process and everything. It wasn't like there was no like money that changed hands or anything like that. And I remember like when I asked for an analysis between the spending that we were doing, that we were proposing to do at Tizen versus the building of other schools. No one had thought about it, to do an analysis, right? A comparison so that we can show it to the media. And I remember when the numbers came back and I looked at it and I was like, well, what the hell? The same PDN that was like, rah, let's go forward with the JFK rebuild, is the same PDN that was like, oh, this Tizen thing is a bad deal and the numbers don't make sense. When what the numbers showed was that the worst school development in terms of numbers, in terms of how much money we were going to spend on square foot, was the JFK development. It was by far the most expensive deal that we had ever gone through in a school build in the government of Guam. By square foot, by far. And it was allowed to move through at those numbers because of the sidestepping of the procurement process, because everybody was like, let's just move this thing forward, not considering what the cost would be. And we are still paying for that JFK rebuild right now. Now, let me ask you again. Is it worth it to sidestep the procurement process? And then let me pepper this in. It's kind of unbelievable that the administration would be asking to sidestep the procurement process days after an audit comes out that slams the administration for records missing on procurement files where federal funds could have been used through sidesteps of the procurement process. I mean, it just kind of blows my mind. And maybe the audacity of this thing is the fault, how audacious the administration has become is the fault of the media over the past 8 years, and the fault of the public over the past 8 years of not being loud enough and not being, and not scrutinizing things enough over the past years. Questions of impropriety and misconduct to the point where the administration doesn't even think twice about putting out a call to sidestep the procurement process for a project that will cost more than $100 million right after it gets an audit that slams them for sidestepping the procurement process and possibly being involved in corrupt acts. I mean, the audacity. Right? It's already 9:14 a.m. I was going to go to a discussion about an unnecessary constitutional and hospital crisis that has emerged, and an interesting brief by the legislature in this whole fight between the governor and the AG that is brewing amid a declaratory judgment request before the Supreme Court of Guam regarding the governor's powers in the hospital. But I think I'll instead transfer that to tonight's show, the evening show, the Troy Torres show. If there is no reality check or the Michael Nicholas show, actually, I want to ask Michael Nicholas if he can record a show tonight, because I want him to talk about this investigation and what and his thoughts on it. Anyway, so I'm not gonna. We'll move that discussion to either tonight or to another day. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You all have a wonderful day. God bless you, and please do put your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to, if you would like for your opinions to be seen by a wide audience, please do send them to news@kanditnews.com. Include your write-up in either inline text or in word processing format, either in Microsoft Word or in Pages, preferably if you use a Mac. And your full name as you want it to appear in the byline, your short bio data, like John S. Cruz is from Manila, has a PhD or whatever, right? and your headshot, and we will gladly post your opinion. We're going to be posting a couple that have come in over the past couple of days this morning. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. You have a great day. God bless you.
You asked, we delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.